Hey everyone, Mike here, and this is the Asus Vivobook TP501, a mid-level laptop with Skylake hardware and a 15.6-inch screen that can rotate all the way around onto the back. In other words, this is a 15-inch convertible which can be used as a regular notebook, as a tablet, or in stand-and presentation modes if so desired. But is it actually worth buying? Well, stick around for the next few minutes and you'll find out. On the outside, the Vivobook TP501 is a refinement of the older Asus TP500, slightly better built and a bit more compact. Asus put a significant effort into creating a strong screen, which shows little to no flex, mainly thanks to its metallic hood and glass-covered display. They also revamped the hinges. There are two of them on this new model and they are stiff enough to hold the screen in place as set up, but also allow smooth transition between modes. You'll need to use both hands to lift up the screen or switch between them though. The laptop's main body, on the other hand, is entirely made out of plastic, while some of the competitors get an aluminum inner deck as well. So the interior doesn't exactly feel premium, but it's not bad either, as the plastic on the palm rest is matte and actually gets a brushed texture. As for the belly, well, Asus used a soft piece of silver plastic for this part, with 4 rubber feet, an air intake grill and 2 side cuts for the speakers. The exhaust grill is placed on the back edge and the fan pushes hot air away from users, while the entire I/O is grouped on the lateral sides with 2 USB 3.0 ports, 1 USB 2.0 port, an USB 3.1 Type-C slot, a card reader, HDMI output and a LAN connector. I'm not very happy with the fact that most of the ports are squished on the right edge and will cause cables to interfere with my mouse, and I'm not a fan of the power button's placement either, which sits on the left edge. But at least it's small and rather stiff, so you shouldn't worry about pressing it by mistake. Overall, the Asus Vivobook TP501 is a well-built and fairly nice-looking laptop. It feels good in hand thanks to its rounded edges and sturdy frame, and I think it should age well. The soft plastic on the back and the metal on the hood might scratch fairly easily though, so you'll want to be careful about that. The convertible screen is one of its strong suits. On the other hand, keep in mind that this is a fairly large and heavy computer, so it's not going to be very comfortable to hold as a tablet or when switching between modes. However, my biggest nit with this laptop is the 1920 by 1080 pixel TN panel that Asus chose for it, which is just bad by today's standards, especially when the competition puts IPS panels on their 15-inch convertibles. The tests show poor contrast and color reproduction, while the limited vertical viewing angles are something you'll notice from the first seconds you lay your eyes on the screen, especially if you're used to higher-end panels. It's worth adding that this is a touchscreen and there's little to complain on this front. But at the same time, the glass on top of the panel and the low brightness make it very difficult to use in bright environments, so keep it indoors. Where your hands go, you'll find a pretty good keyboard and a large palm rest. The layout is classic for a 15-inch Asus laptop, with rather short arrow keys and a squashed numpad area. But this keyboard actually types surprisingly well, as the keys pose the right amount of resistance, travel deep enough inside the frame and are actually quiet. On the other hand, there's no backlighting and some of you might find their finishing a bit rough. The trackpad is large and has a decent ridge around, so you can easily find your way around it without having to lower your eyes. It also performs fairly well, although it does keep light taps here and there. What bothers me is the lack of proper customization options though, as the Asus Smart Gesture app leaves lots to be desired, but overall I think this is at least a half-decent trackpad. Hardware-wise, we had the TP501UA model for our review, equipped with an Intel Core i7 processor, 8GB of DDR3 RAM and a regular 2.5-inch hard drive for storage. The memory is upgradable, the 2.5-inch drive can also be replaced and there's an M.2 slot inside for an M.2 SSD. You'll have to unscrew the screws on the bottom and then pop out the palm rest and the keyboard area in order to get to the hardware, and that will only allow quick access to the 2.5-inch bay. For the RAM and the M.2 slot, you'll have to take the motherboard out, so make sure you know what you're doing. When it comes to performance, this is a capable computer, although its speed is dragged down by the slow hard drive. It can still handle all the daily activities at ease, from browsing with multiple tabs open to watching any sort of video content, and it can also run some games at the native 1080p resolution, albeit some older ones with reduced details. If you're interested in benchmarks and gaming results, you'll find those in the written version of the review, it's the first link in the description. Also, keep in mind that Asus will offer a TP501UB model with dedicated Nvidia 940M graphics, the option of choice if you're into games. We'll also talk about the available configurations in the written article. Now, a few words about the thermals and acoustics. There's a fan inside the Vivobook TP501 and it starts spinning even with the lightest of tasks. On top of that, there's also a mechanical hard drive, so this computer is not going to be perfectly quiet, no matter how you take it. However, I do think Asus should temper down the fan on the final retail versions, so it won't kick on with light activities, especially since this notebook runs very cool and there's a lot of thermal headroom with most activities. Connectivity-wise, there's Bluetooth, gigabit LAN and wireless AC on this laptop. The Wi-Fi chip performs admirably even if the computer is further away from the router, where some other metallic laptops tend to struggle, and I didn't run into any drops or problems during my tests. There's also a USB 3.1 slot that I've already mentioned before, but it does not support Thunderbolt 3 speeds. The speakers aren't bad either. They do lack bass, but sound overall decent and are loud enough to fill a mid-sized room. They don't distort or vibrate at max volumes either. The webcam on the other hand is simply horrible, at least on our test version. Moving on, there's a 38 Wh battery on this laptop, which is surprisingly small given how most other 15-inchers house at least a 40 Wh battery and the older TP500 actually bundled a 48 Wh one. Now, the hardware is efficient and the TN screen doesn't ask for much in terms of energy, so as a result this computer will offer around 7 hours of video playing and 3 to 5 hours of daily use. But it would have lasted longer with a more adequate sized battery. One final aspect we should touch is price. The Asus Vivobook TP501 is expected in stores in February, and based on what we know right now, a Core i5 6200U configuration with hard drive storage will sell for around $750, but take this with a grain of salt. Configurations with Core i7 processors, more RAM, Nvidia 940M graphics and SSD storage are also available, going up to around $1,100. You'll find more details about all this in the written article. Drawing the line on the Vivobook TP501, build-wise, Asus did a good job here, although do keep in mind that the main body is entirely made from plastic. The keyboard, trackpad and I/O are solid as well, and the laptop performs well and runs cool. On the other hand, the poor TN panel and the rather small battery might be enough to steer you towards something else, especially if these are not compensated by an adequate pricing policy. We'll see. And that's because the TP501 is not the only mid-level 15-inch convertible worthy of attention. The Lenovo Flex 315, the Dell Inspiron 15 7000 2-in-1 and the HP Envy X360 15 are just some of the alternatives, most of them with bigger batteries, better screens and some selling for as low as $600. So what I'm saying here is that if you're in the market for a device like this Vivobook TP501, you'll want to check out all the options and see which offers the best value for your money at the time you're watching this clip. With that in mind, we'll wrap this up here. Thanks for watching, make sure to hit that thumbs up button if you enjoyed the video and subscribe for more. See you in the next one.